Hi guys, and welcome to my showcase and tutorial for Skill Tree. Now this is a re-release of this video explaining what Skill Tree is and how it functions, because a lot has changed since its original release earlier this year. So I just want to basically go through what this plugin is, what it actually provides you with, and yeah, a bit more about it. So just on my my server at the moment, Australis EVE. So let's get into it. So basically what Skill Tree is a plugin that allows you to adds a leveling system to your server. So basically when a player hits a tree, mines a node, kills an animal, they are awarded with some form of XP, as you can see down the bottom right corner of my screen. An example of this would be if I grab a hatchet, walk up to a tree, see my XP bar down the bottom right corner is currently going up. So what I'll do is I'll bring up the menu settings, and you'll see also when I hit the tree as well, with that setting turned on, I'm actually accumulating XP at the top as well, so you can see a little pop-up XP. So that's kind of how it functions, and there's different XP triggers for different events, such as when I hit a tree I get 8 XP, whereas if I fall a tree, so if I completely chop it down, final hit should give me 40. There you go. So different variations for different tasks. Picking up things off the ground also awards me a different value of XP as well, depending on, well, actually not depending on what it is, basically if it's a regular item, so 30 XP. And then obviously mining nodes and mining out nodes also award different values of XP as well. So that's kind of how XP is accumulated. And the difference between this and a lot of other leveling plugins is it's just one individual level. It's just basically developing one level with your character, not multiple different XP bars for multiple different types of gathering types. So it's all kind of one or all. So you can do the tasks you enjoy doing and then buff the ones that you also enjoy doing, or the ones that you don't enjoy doing to do them less. Now to bring up the menu, there's an option to assign this to human NPC, so you can make it so they have to go speak to an NPC in order to upgrade their skills. Otherwise you can type in /st or skill tree or skills or one of the other commands that you can configure in the menu, and you're basically given this screen here. So you can see if I click left and right, it switches between different skill trees depending on what type I've got. I also have a button over here called respec, which allows me to respec and basically reassign my points. You can see I've got available points as 26. It also has my current level and my current XP into my level, as well as the XP required to the next level. And then down here we have the player settings button. So I'll take you through this before we get into the actual skills. Now player settings is a recently added feature to Skill Tree, and this actually allows you to visually see the different settings and toggle them. So you can say toggle XP indicator that is displayed when gaining XP, and that's that little XP pop-up that sort of appears up here. So you can toggle that on or off, depending on what your requirements are there. Toggle XP pump bar, which is the bar down the bottom right corner. If I turn that on and off, you can see it kind of disappearing and reappearing down the bottom right corner there. And then reposition the XP pump bar. So I can actually press this, which brings up another menu. And you can see here I can actually adjust the direction and the position of my XP bar, and then close that when I'm ready. So that's the player settings there, and players have access to be able to adjust those settings via chat commands or through the CUI directly. Now when I select a node, you'll see it actually comes up with the information of the node here. One of the features and one of the updates to this is that it no longer recenters your mouse when you change between them, and that's because I did manage to fix it in a way. So basically it will stay, the one you've selected will remain selected regardless of how fast you click. So you can see here we've got stroke of luck under the mining tree. So mining tree is obviously around mining, increasing yields, adding to luck, instant mines, that sort of thing. So I'll take you through each of the nodes and show you what they actually provide you with. So stroke of luck is basically a percentage chance based on how many points you put into it. There's a 5% chance per level to spawn a new node after the current node is destroyed. So you can see here it has a maximum level of 5, and I currently have 0 points put into it. Now if I want to input some points into this, I can press level up, and you can see a few things have changed. The value has gone up. I've now got something under my buff information here, which has node spawn chances plus 5%. Now if I level this up again, You can see here this is a cumulative. Now if you've got multiple buffs that affect the same buff type, like multiple skills that affect the same buff type, it's all accumulative. So you can see here an example would be Amateur Miner has a 10% chance per level to increase my mining yield. Increases mining yield by 10%, sorry. And whenever I click this, it increases accumulatively. Now before I click on it a third time, one thing to note with skill tree is that it's actually tier based. So if I attempt to use this, if I attempt to unlock Adept Miner, it's going to say I haven't got enough points spent in this tree in order to do so. To access row 2, I need to have placed at least 5 points into the tree. As you can see, I've only placed 4. And for row 3, I need to have placed 10 points in total. So if I place this now, you can see here this middle row is now unlocked, as well as the mining yield is accumulated to plus 30%. Now you can see here Amateur Miner and Adept Miner both have the same effect. They both increase the player's mining yield. So if I level up this one, you can see the value is still adding itself onto mining yield. It's not adding an additional field on there called mining yield, it's simply affecting the same buff. So buffs are kind of global for a player. It doesn't matter what skills level up, if those skills have the same buff valuations, so same buff types, they're going to increase that yield or that value on the right hand side. If I level this up to Expert Miner, so you can see here my yield increases quite significant, 225%. Now these are all configurable. You can adjust what each of these values give you, what the maximum level is of these nodes, how many points required for rows 2 and 3 to access. The whole thing's completely configurable. You can even disable and change all of these, or shift them around so they have different tiers and rankings. So the only hard limit at the moment is that you can only have 3 of basically 9 total, so 3 tier 1, 3 tier 2, and 3 tier 3. And that's it from a functional point of view. Now, to get back into the, I guess what's included with the mining skill tree, you've got one here called Instant Mining, which is a 5% chance per level of instantly mining out a node on hit. So that means every time you hit it, there's a chance that the node will be instantaneously mined out and you'll be awarded all the resources instantly. This one here adds an additional mining loot table. So whenever you mine out a node, there's a 1% chance per level to acquire a random item from a unique drop table. And that again is configurable. So by default it's just a couple of different swipe cards, but you can add whatever the heck you want onto that. Refiner gives you a 10% chance per level to refine the mined ore instead of receiving it as a raw variant. So if I mine some sulfur, instead of receiving sulfur ore, I receive actual sulfur that's been refined if the proc hits. So at max level it's a 50% chance. And the last one here is Refiner, which increases your robust pickaxe, which decreases the durability loss of your mining equipment by 10% per level. So it gives you a cap of 50% durability loss at max level there by default. Woodcutting is very similar. So the 3 sort of central nodes here are more around yield increases, similar sort of values to mining. This one here is also instant woodcutting, so if you hit a tree, there's a chance that you'll instantly destroy a tree and receive all of the resources from it. This one also adds an additional loot table to woodcutting as well, so when you knock a tree over, it's a percentage chance that you'll obtain or receive a random item from a tree. Chimney gives you a 10% chance to receive some charcoal in addition to the wood that you receive. So at 50% you can effectively cut charcoal from the trees. You'll also still receive the logs in addition to it though. And the last one is Robust Axe as well, so it's again a durability loss reduction skill, so it makes your axes last longer. Skinning is a little bit more unique, so Skill Tracker is one of the new buffs that's been introduced, and this is has a maximum level of 1 because it's a buff type that's either on or off, it's not a percentage increase. So if I click it and level it up, you'll see here that I've got it enabled now. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to use the /track command to get the direction of the closest animal. So if I close this and type in /track, I can see slightly older animal tracks heading towards the east. Now if I continue to go this direction, type in track, wait 2 more seconds, oh, there he is. Now because I'm in range of this thing, if I type tracking in, I see fresh animal tracks heading to the southeast. Now this is it uses sort of fresh, slightly old and then very old sort of as signals to distance, so I won't tell the exact meterage between you and the animal, but it'll tell you kind of roughly based on that information how far away you are. So Yeah, that's kind of how that one works. And there is a cooldown, obviously, to stop players from using it too often. So this one here is around yield increases again. So amateur, adept, and expert skinner increases the yield or the amount of resources you receive from flesh. Instant skinner works the same way as nodes and trees do. Won't go too much into that. Now this one does have two variations of durability reduction, which means if you level both of them up, you don't lose durability on skinning weapons. So pretty handy to have. And the last one is Survival Chef, which gives you a 10% chance per level to receive your meat cooked rather than raw while skinning. So if you are harvesting a bear and you happen upon bear meat while this procs, this will give you cooked bear meat instead of raw. Harvesting is both for farming and general collection, so it covers both player grown materials and non-grown materials. I better just put my gun away so the helicopter doesn't attack me. Player grown materials and non-grown materials, so you can see in the central ones here are for our wild ingredients, so things like obviously wild hemp bushes, massive wild hemp bushes, sulfur ores, metal ores, diesel barrels, anything kind of you can kind of walk over and pick up from the map with E is affected by this value. So this is basically a yield increase for that. The ones on the left here are yield increases for actual farming, so player grown items such as hemp and pumpkins and everything else you can grow. And then we've got Fisherman, which is basically a 20% chance per level of receiving an extra fish when you catch a fish. So when you catch a fish, if you catch a shark, this rolls, and if you have a successful roll, it gives you an extra shark. And this one here is Extra Pockets, which is again a new one. You can basically adds a backpack to your player by typing /pouch, and allows you to store items in there, which this one gives you it unlocks more slots per level. So if I level this up to show you, type in /pouch, 2 slots there available. If I level this one up all the way to points, if I type in pouch again, fully maxed out, it gives me additional 10 slots. Again, you can set this value to whatever you want, so go nuts. Whoops, that's not the right one. Yeah, go nuts. So, cool. All right, so that's it for the harvesting tree. Now we're going to the medical tree. So this one here is truck block full with some useful items. So the first one is Radiation Expert, which gives you a 10% damage reduction from radiation. Bandage Expert gives you double the amount of bandage healing received from bandages additionally, so it goes from 5 health to 10 health. Revitalization gives you a passive regeneration of 0.1 health per second per level, so this maxes out at 0.5 health per second, just passively regenerating at all times while your player is alive. Accident Evasion is a 10% reduction of fall damage as well as perfect balance, so both of those combined give you no fall damage, but it requires 10 invested skill points to do so. Flame Retardant is a 10% damage reduction to fire per level. Battle Medic is a 10%, well basically when you bring a player up from who's wounded and you have this skill, it will assign them an extra 10% per level to their health. So if you have this maxed out, it will give them 50% or give them 50 health when they get up, as opposed to the measly sort of 5 to 10 health that they normally get up with. So pretty good if you've got players or friends who are always getting wounded. Rugged Up prevents you from being damaged by the cold and actually removes the cold as well, so you don't have any adverse effects from cold. So great for if you're planning on living in the snow. And Second Wind is a 5% chance of immediately getting up after being wounded, and this will actually give you a slight heal and remove any sort of debuffs as well, such as bleeding or radiation or anything like that. So pretty handy. Procs. Combat Tree is to do with combat. So Duelist is a 10% melee damage reduction. So if you get attacked by someone with a spear or an NPC with a machete, gives you a 50% damage reduction at max level. Animal Tame is the same but for animals. Old Timey Expert is basically a primitive, no durability loss for your primitive weapons such as spears and bone knives and whatnot. So you can, if you like primitive raiding, then this is your this is the one for you. Resourceful is a 2% chance per level of not consuming a bullet when firing, and this is for any bullet. So anything that triggers the hook for this, basically including explosive 5.56 ammunition, has a 2% chance per level up to a maximum of 10% by default of returning the bullet to your magazine. The last three here are around PvP specifically. So there's this is a 1% damage buff per level in PvP. This one here is a 1% chance of dealing critical damage when you hit, so it deals an extra 25% damage of whatever you hit them for, on top of the hit. Has a 1% chance per level of doing so. And then Guarded is a 2% damage reduction per level. Buildcraft is specifically around building, crafting, and researching, as well as recycling. So, is it recycling? No, I think it's the next one. No, it is furnacing. So we've got Thrifty Renovator here, which basically gives you a 5% chance per level of receiving your building materials back when upgrading your building blocks. So whenever you upgrade your base from wood to stone, stone to metal, metal to high quality, there's a 5% chance you'll get those materials back while this is active. Tinkerer increases your crafting speed by 5%. Adept Tinker increases by 5% per level, and Expert Tinker is 10% per level, with all three combined basically being instant craft. Thrifty Tinker is a 5% chance of per level of receiving your components back from crafting. So if you do a lot of crafting for your team or as an individual, this will refund those. Gives you a 5% chance per level of refunding all of those components back. Blast Furnace is a 10% chance to smelt ore when a log is burned, rather than the standard smelt rate. So if you ever look at a furnace and you see the wood being consumed by the furnace, this actually rolls a 10% chance whenever that happens that it will actually smelt some of the ore that's in the furnace, or each stack of the ore that's in the furnace. And the last one here is Researcher, which gives you a 5% chance per level of receiving scrap back when researching. So really sort of ideal on a wipe as an early sort of unlock on wipe, but probably not so great if you've got lots of blueprints. The Scavenging Skill Tree is by far the most popular on my server because it is pretty amazing. So the first one here is Barrel Smasher, which is a simple enable or disable buff. As you can see, he has a maximum level of 1. If we unlock it, it's simply enabled. What that allows you to do is allows you to one-hit a barrel with anything. So if you hit it with a bone knife or a torch or a cold breeze, if you can wield that, it'll break the barrel. Looter gives you a 4% chance per level of receiving extra scrap when smashing a barrel. So basically think of it like a scrap tea, but just always on and working. As 4% chance per level rather than guaranteed. And then we have Loot Magnet, which is again one of the relatively newer ones. It gives you a 20% chance per level to add the loot straight to your inventory. So when you hit a barrel, or actually crates as well, but there's a config option by default disabling crates. Whenever you hit a barrel, it will, and the barrel breaks, it will automatically move all of the items from the barrel's inventory into your inventory rather than dropping them to the ground. Now by default there's actually no distance restriction, so you can effectively use a bolty to snipe barrels from halfway across the map and receive the inventory loot. But there is a configuration option to limit the distances and also require melee only, so players can't use projectile weapons to take advantage of this. So obviously adjust it to your server's requirements, but that's how it works by default. Electronics Luck is a 2% chance per level of finding electronics in a crate. So what this does is when you open a crate for the first time, it rolls a roll based on whatever your buff value is, and if you're successful, it will add another loot slot into the crate and populate it with a random electronics item in the game, excluding the ones that you specify in a blacklist. So anything in the blacklist will be excluded from the roll, but anything that isn't on there will be rolled for and can be added at a random value. Again, it's all configurable how much is actually dropped, and you can do that through the config. So Lucky Looter works the same way, except it's going to add extra scrap into the crate rather than electronics items. And then Component Luck works the same way, but for components instead of electronics. And then finally we have the similar sort of thing here, Electronic Salvager and Component Salvager, which is a 2% chance per level of finding additional components when destroying barrels. So obviously barrels being more plentiful, this probably procs more than the crate one will. And then the last one is Optimized Recycling, which is it increases your recycling tick speed by 0.8 seconds per level, so faster recycling. The vehicle skill tree is, again, it's newish, and this is all around optimizing and speeding up some of the vehicles as well as bringing down maintenance costs. So Yachtman will give you a 20% speed increase with any boat per level when the turbo is enabled. And you can enable the turbo type by typing in C turbo or /C turbo, or by pressing the mouse 3 button if the config allows it. Amateur rider, adept rider, and expert rider give your horse crack. Basically, it makes it go ridiculously fast when you get on it, and then obviously back to normal when you get off. So that's it's only a temporary buff when you're riding the horse. If you're not riding the horse, then it doesn't do anything. The vehicles, so the economical captain is a fuel reduction for your boat. So fuel reduction per level for boats. So up to a maximum of whatever to a maximum of 75% fuel reduction for your vehicles. Economical Pilot is a 3% fuel reduction on helicopters per level, up to a maximum of 15%, and then you've got Hybrid Pilot, which is 7% per level, up to a maximum of, say, 35%, but I'll probably be wrong. If we whack all these up to max, you can see here we have a total of 50% fuel reduction for heli. And the last one is Mechanic, which is a simple on-off, which allows you to repair any vehicle with a hammer without any material components at all. So you can walk up, hit anything with a hammer, any vehicle with a hammer, and it repairs it to maximum health straight away. Obviously unless it's been damaged recently, so you have to wait for the combat timer. The last skill tree is Cooking. Now this one here has only got 4 buffs on it. More will be added to it as I come up with them, but that's what it is now. But funny enough, 4 buffs, this last one here is actually pretty powerful, which I'll go into in a minute. So Easily Satisfied basically gives you a so increases the amount of calories and hydration received by 20% per level when eating food. It's actually as well as drinking water, I believe. So if you drink water, it should also basically increase it by 20% per level. Iron Stomach prevent you from being sick when consuming raw and spoiled food. Against one of those things where you can just turn it on and it becomes on, and you can no longer be poisoned. So if you eat sardines or what the hell they call those, pickles, sorry, or if you eat I don't know, poisoned food, rotten food, spoiled food, if your service allows that, it won't actually give you any ailments. It'll just simply make you all better. Glutton increases your total hydration and calories by 20% per level. So instead of being default 500 and 250, it becomes 500, so 1000 and 500. So it doubles the amount. So you basically can go for longer without having to fill up the tank. And the last one, which I think is by far the best one, is a chance to receive your item back by 10% per level when consumed. So this works for pretty much anything that you consume, such as items from cooking, or like from the cooking plugin, which like full-on meals, you'll get those meals back if this procs, as well as teas. So if you drink a wood tea or a scrap tea or whatever other teas there are, there's a 50% chance at max level that you will receive that back. So that's it for the for our skill tree specifically. Now we do have the ability here, as you can see, we have a respec cost. Now this is basically, again, as I mentioned before, to respec and refund all the points that we have invested in our tree. Now you can see here I've got a total spent of 45, and this value here is based on how many, as a certain value of scrap per point spent, not per point spent in a tree. So this respecs the entire skill tree system, not just an individual page. So if I press respec and then press confirm, you can see here I paid 1350 scrap to respec. I have all my points back, and I can start again. And that is pretty much it for the in-game demonstration of this system. You can see here if I kill this pig, it's pig as well. Just wanted to show up death effects too. So that's it pretty for the in-game portion of this demo. I'll take you to the configuration and give us a very light touch on the config, because the config is very large, very customizable. But I'll show you the important parts and show you how the leveling and stuff works, how the XP and everything else is calculated. So let's move on to that. Okay, so we're in the configuration side of skill tree. It's going to take you through line by line until we get to the recipes and, sorry, not recipes, actual trees and nodes. And explain what each of these things do very quickly. So points required to unlock tier 2 and tier 3. Basically this is how many points need to be invested into a tree in order to unlock them. Skill points per level, this is how many points a player receives and they're able to spend per level. Maximum points a player can spend, which is default by 100. Now this is this base is a hard limit, so if a player can get to like level 300 and gets 2 points per level to level 300 but only has a maximum spend value of 100, this is kind of king. It means that they will not be able to spend more than 100 points in the tree. If you don't want to have a point limit, set it to 0. Modified max skill points based on permissions. Now this is one of the new features in this plugin as well, is that you can actually add VIP or other permission groups to be able to award more or higher skill caps. So if you want to have a VIP limit of 120 and say an admin limit or something like that of 150, these would be overriding. So whatever the highest group the player has is going to be the maximum they're going to be able to put into their skill trees. Maximum level per player can go to is a level 100 by default. Again, if you don't want to have a level cap, set this value to 0. Allow players to respec their skill points. Now by default this is set to true. This means that this respec button appears, otherwise if it's set to false the respec button shouldn't be there. Cost per point to respec is set to 30 by default, and this inherits from the currency type just down below, so you can use scrap, SRP, economics or custom, and custom simply requires a display name, a short name and a skin value for the custom currency. So if you want to use bananas or something like that, you can use bananas. Cost per point to respec based on permission, so instead of having a value of 30, again you can set this value, create a new group and set the value to 15 or 10. Now you don't actually need to create the group. This plugin will automatically create the group, create a group called cooking, so skill tree dot and then whatever you put here. So skill tree dot VIP is the permission you would need to assign to whatever group or player individually that you'd need to. Yeah, there's no registering permissions at all. Maximum components for a player to drop with the component perk is 1, a minimum, sorry, and then maximum. So you can set these to values to whatever you like. This is just how many, in terms of a quantity value, it's going to spawn of those items. So it's the same for minimum electronics, for minimum maximum for electronics. Minimum and maximum scrap that it'll drop from barrels for a player. Human NPC names that are used over the skill tree. So if you've got a human NPC, you could add its name in there, and that'll basically, when players interact with that human NPC, it will trigger the skill tree to be visible, as the skill tree chat command actually requires permission, so you don't necessarily have to allow players to be able to use that. Use mouse 3 to toggle the boat to turbo, performance heavy on high pop servers. It basically means that players can press the middle mouse button or mouse fire 3 in order to toggle their turbo on or off, otherwise they can use a chat command instead. And the chat command by default is turbo, so /turbo in chat. The 3 chat commands to open up the skill tree menu is /st, /skill tree and /skills. You can set these to whatever you like, or add as many as you like, or as little as you like. Chat commands to get the player, so to get the player XP is /xp by default. Again, it's not really too relevant with the pump bar and everything else there now, but it's just there as a nice to have. Players lose XP when they're killed in PvP, so this is if you want players to lose XP when they die to another player, so that's false if not, true to BS. Players lose XP when they are killed in PvE, set to true or false depending on what your preferences are. Maximum amount of player can lose when they die is 10,000, but the players will not go down a level. So if a player is killed and they at the start of their new level, they will just go to the beginning of that new level, or they'll lose 10,000 XP depending on what's actually possible. And then there's also a permission-based reduction as well. So if you want VIPs to lose less XP when they die, you know, a bit of pay win on your server, yeah, you can do that. How long should a player? So should the XP be displayed for when it appears? Basically, it appears in front of the player. So when they hit a tree and that little XP pop-up appears, by default it'll display for a second before disappearing. Delay between attempts to track animals, so this basically restricts the animal /track command to every 10 seconds.
Erase all data on wipe. So this is if you want the data to be erased when the server wipes, i.e. player levels reset and everything else. So that's true if you obviously run a monthly server and all the data gets erased monthly. Otherwise, if you want it to persist between wipes, set that to false. Refund skill points on server wipe, set to true by default. This means that any skill points a player has invested into nodes will automatically be refunded when the server wipes. Obviously, if the data is erased, this point here is irrelevant. So yeah, if you've got that set to true, this is really meaningless. Global blacklists. These items will not gain XP and benefits at all. I don't know why this has appeared 4 times, but yeah, Bone Club is definitely one I recommend keeping on there because it is the most OP piece of shit fucking weapon when it comes to on dispenser gather triggers. So make sure that's on there and add whatever else you want on there. There's actually a separate thing for power tools such as jackhammers and chainsaws, so don't bother putting them in here if you want to blacklist them. There's actually another section further down which we'll get to. Restrict XP gain from tools listed in the tools list below. Format for better chat title showing the player's level set to null to disable. So basically, this is if you're running better chat and you want to have the player's level appear in front of their name. That's all this is. If you're not familiar with better chat, just don't touch this. Default color for better chat. Again, if you're not familiar with hex colors, don't touch it. Otherwise, change it to your liking. The default XP bar offset. This is for any new players connecting to the server. So when a player connects to the server, this is where the XP bar is going to anchor by default. So you can adjust these settings manually, or you can adjust them in game. Get the coordinates, look at your data file, and then import those values into here if you want to set a different default. Otherwise, where it is usually pretty good. Power tool modifiers. Now this one here actually allows you to adjust the power tools XP and buffs based on their values. So mining, I basically have mine all set to 0, which effectively disables them. So you don't want. Generally, I don't find it practice to have chainsaws and jackhammers really doing anything for the skill tree plugin because they do prop too much. So I set them all to 0, but 1.0 would equate to full value, 0.0 equates to no value, 0.5 would equate to 50% value. So prevent XP loss when dying in an event hosted by Event Manager. So Event Manager is a plugin that's used as a core plugin for my Hunger Games, Scuba Arena, Fishing Competition, and Skirmish, as well as any other plugins that people decide to develop in the future. It just means that players won't lose XP when they die in there, which is probably good if you want people to actually use that. Color for better chat XP types for players who are max level. This is a separate value for players who have hit max level to kind of show that they have hit max level. Instant repair effects. These are just different effect directories. If you're not familiar with how effects and .prefab files work, don't touch them. Otherwise, if you are, adjust them to your likings. There's one for level up, one for node unlock, node level, instant repair effect, and yeah. PvP buff critical damage modifier picks a random value between 0 and declared value and adds that on top of the hit. So if you hit a critical on the player, if you were to do say 50 damage, it'll roll a number between 0 and 30% of that value. So 30% of 50, which is 15, quick math. And that basically means it'll do between 0 and 15 damage extra when that hits. Require grown plants to be ripe to provide XP. So that means that plants actually need to be fully grown in order to actually give the player XP. Give the player with the highest XP bonus skill points next wipe. That means whenever the server wipes, the player who had the most XP will receive additional skill points equal to the next value here. Details of horses to change when a player mounts a horse with a perk unlocked. So these are basically, do you want the modifiers to affect these particular attributes on the horse? Now, these values, the way I've got this structured is actually a pretty, I find it's probably best case. It wouldn't really tweak this if you're not familiar with it. It basically means that the run speed and the max speed are affected, which is when the player holds down shift. So you get the horse on crack sort of speeds with these values set to true, but then it doesn't become impossible to turn or even like sort of position if you set all these to true, because that can cause a lot of problems. So if you're not sure what you're doing, leave it as is, but if you are confident, set whatever you want to true. Should the loot pickup buff only work with melee weapons? By default it's set to false. It means you can shoot barrels with the loot pickup buff and it'll put those things in your inventory. Allow loot pickup buff to work with crates, by default set to false, otherwise if you want players to be able to shoot a crate from across the map and have all the contents moved to the... that's probably not great, but you know, whatever. Enable XP drop HUDs for players by default. That's when a player connects to the server. The XP little drop down HUD appears, but it's disabled by default. Require players to have specific tree permissions to open them. So this means that if you're running, for example, another plugin like my professions plugin, and you don't want people with the mining profession to get access to woodcutting skill tree, then set that to true and then require those players to have or allocate permissions like skill tree.woodcutting or skill tree.mining to the relevant profession groups to be able to give them access to those trees, and that'll restrict their usage to those individual tree branches. Or you can do skilltree.org to give access to everything. Should we have a maximum distance for the loot pickup buff? 0 is unlimited, so basically it means that if this value is set to 0, it's going to trigger, whereas like regardless of the distance, wherever you put say 10, it's going to mean you have to be within 10 meters of it in order for it to trigger, or whatever the unit of measurement Russ uses. Bag cooldown time is basically how often you can open the bag with the /pouch command. Yeah, how often you can open that up. So the bag prefab is the type of container it bases the information off. You can change it to a coffin or whatever, but you can do so at your own risk. Works pretty fine with this, depending on how many bag slots you want to allow. So bag item blacklist, this is a list of items that you don't want players to be able to put into this pouch bag. So if you want to add items to this, you can simply format it in this way. If you want to add additional items, you can do this. So put your indents in there, but I don't know, something you don't want to be able to put scrap in there. I don't know, something else, berries, whatever. Like you can put those sorts of item short names in there, and that'll prevent those items from being moved in there if it detects them. Drop bag on death, set by default set to true, so if the player does have a pouch and they die, that item will be dropped on death. As a little loot bag under them. A blacklist of items that will not be allowed, so not be refunded when using Thrifty Tinker buff. And these are items such as explosives, gunpowder, and sulfur, so people can't just raid for cheap. Woodcutting tools, again you can remove these or add more or whatever. Woodcutting tools are, that meet the whitelist requirements and work with the reduced durability abilities. Hatchets, axe or salvaged, stone hatchet and chainsaws are all whitelisted and all give the reduced durability thing, but chainsaws are overridden by the previous ones that disable power tools. So if you've got a modifier set on that, that will override this value here. Mining tools are exactly the same thing. It's all about whitelist and reduced durability. Same for skinning tools. Primitive weapons, this is a list of weapons that fall under the primitive class and take no durability damage when the buff is unlocked. A list of animals that basically will trigger for the resistibility. It's basically every animal. Blacklist of parts of components, electrical luck abilities. These items, if they're rolled, won't be given to the player. They'll be ignored and re-rolled. So also they'll be removed from the roll list. So they can't possibly be given as part of those buffs. Mining like loot tables, woodcutting like loot tables. You get the idea. You can add your own sort of short names and the quantities of items that can drop, and it'll choose a random number between 0 and whatever 1 and whatever the value set here. Whitelist of loot crates that trigger the spawn chance for components, electronics and scrap. These so basically means that any crate listed here is going to be the one that allows that can spawn these electronics, components and scraps. That way you haven't got like the basic crates being able to spawn those things. Experience sources and what their values are. This is actually a pretty important one. This is how much XP you get for doing things. So in the previous, in the actual in-game, I showed you a tree hit was 8 XP with the value was 40 when you hit it final. Node and node hit final work the same way. Skin hit and skin hit final work the same way. Collect wild plant, ground wild plant's obviously different. You've also got ones for building block deploy, but I'd highly recommend leaving that to 0 because there is a lot of abuse that can be done with this. Fishing cord is when a player catches a fish. Crafting is per second of crafting, so if they're crafting for 10 seconds they get 5 XP by default. Scientist normal is 150, tunnel dweller is 125, scientist heavy is 300 by default. That's obviously the big bad guys. Small animals are things like chickens, medium animals are things like boars and deer, I believe are classified as medium. Large animals are things like bears, polar bears and horses. Road signs are obviously road signs on the side of the road. barrels are barrels, pretty self-explanatory. Scarecrows are things like your zombies. Missions are completing rust missions, Bradley APCs, killing Bradley. Now loot hacked crate, loot heli crate, loot Bradley crate is basically the first person to loot those get the XP reward. Not everyone. Cooking meal XP is actually integrates directly with the cooking plugin, so when you cook meals you get 10 XP per second of cooking to encourage those people to cook. Rateable base completions, win Hunger Games, Scuba Arena Skirmish, and gutting fish all offer different values of XP as rewards. And then here we have our actual skill trees. Now I've converted these skill trees from enums into strings this time, so you can actually create your own skill trees now if you wanted to. So you can see cooking is the last one, but if you did want to create another sort of skill tree, what you could do is you could kind of copy what we've got here, and then, oops, that's not how that works. Kind of copy what we've got here, add a little comma sign, and just start something new, such as new tree or something like that. So it's kind of how that works. Just make sure the buffs and names, or the names are unique. Everything else can be reduplicated, including the icons. And then the last but not least is I think it's the last, is the leveling information. It is the last, cool. So leveling information is the XP for individual levels. So you can see here that by default it's up to 1.23456 XP. And that's actually just a coincidence, but yeah, basically this is actually done via adjusting these two values here. So if you want to make it harder for your players, change this from a 0.9 to a 0.7, and that would increase this value to about 2 million XP, 2 million-ish. There's actually at the bottom of the sales page there's a link to how this is calculated. It's not my formula, it's one I found online. It seems to work pretty well. So the 0.9 is pretty forgiving. I've actually had players being able to hit level 100. One went hard and got there in 2 weeks, which is pretty good. So no one ever hit it when it was 0.07. So it's just a lot of damn XP, a lot of cutting wood. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the configuration side of things. There is data and everything else as well. So players do have data files. They don't wipe unless you tell them to wipe. So if you've got that automatically wipe thing set to false between wipes, then yeah, you might want to clear the data manually during a forced wipe. Otherwise, yeah, she's pretty super straightforward to go. Everything out of the box works very well. This is basically the settings I run on my server. I don't use these sorts of things, but you know, other servers have different requirements and whatnot. But yeah, you guys can do with it as you will. So if you have any questions, any suggestions, any features, let me know. My Discord or Code for Loan Design, or wherever you found this. And yeah, hope to hear from you guys soon.